Welcome to the Daily Brief, your quick, no-fluff update on yesterday's biggest news stories. We'll break down the headlines you need to stay informed without the noise. If you enjoy concise, no-nonsense updates, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you're always in the loop. The UK House of Commons took a monumental step, passing the Assisted Dying Bill after an emotional 5-hour debate. This historic vote marks the first time the state has agreed in principle to assist terminally ill adults in ending their lives. With a vote of 330 to 275, MPs approved the Terminally Ill Adults, End of Life, Bill, which would allow adults with a life expectancy of 6 months or less to seek assistance, pending approval by 2 doctors and a High Court judge. This is the largest Commons vote on social policy since the 1960s abortion laws. The debate was intense and heartfelt, leaving some MPs in tears. Labour MP Kim Leadbeater, who introduced the bill, called it a better approach to end-of-life care. However, opposition led by Tory MP Danny Kruger warned it could lead to what he called a state suicide service. The bill is far from becoming law. More than 200 amendments are expected, and concerns over safeguards for the vulnerable remain a sticking point. Religious groups, including the Church of England and Catholic leaders, have called for MPs to reject the bill in later stages. Supporters like broadcaster Dame Esther Rantzen, who is terminally ill, hailed the vote as a step forward, while opponents like campaigner Merv Kenward pledged to keep fighting. Campaign groups on both sides say the debate over assisted dying is far from over. The bill now moves to committee stage for further scrutiny and amendments, with votes in the House of Lords to follow. This historic decision could shape end-of-life care for generations. Stay tuned for updates on this developing story. The U.S. House of Representatives passed a controversial anti-terror financing bill yesterday, H.R. 9495, known as the Stop Terror Financing and Tax Penalties on American Hostages Act. The final vote was 219 to 184, with 15 Democrats joining Republicans to support the measure. The bill would allow the Treasury Department to revoke the tax-exempt status of non-profit groups it finds to have given material support to terrorist entities. While supporters argue it's a necessary step to cut off terrorist financing, critics warn it grants unchecked power to the executive branch. Democrats expressed concerns that the bill could be abused by President-elect Donald Trump to target non-profit groups he disagrees with politically. Representative Lloyd Doggett called it a death penalty for civil society groups, while Representative Jamie Raskin labeled it unconstitutional due to its lack of due process protections. Some sources have dubbed it the most dangerous anti-terrorism act since the Patriot Act. Proponents like Representative Jason Smith, chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, defended the measure, saying it's critical to prevent organizations like Hamas from benefiting indirectly through US-based nonprofits. They dismissed Democratic concerns as political posturing, noting the bill's bipartisan origins earlier this year. The bill now faces stiff opposition in the Senate, where Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has voiced objections to its provisions on non-profit tax-exempt status. With over 200 proposed amendments and pushback from non-profit groups, the legislation's future remains uncertain. With sharp divisions and significant hurdles ahead, this bill is set to remain a contentious topic in Congress. Stay tuned as we follow its journey through the Senate. Yesterday, over 3 million Irish citizens headed to the polls in a snap election to elect the 174 members of the 34th Dáil Éireann, the largest number of seats ever contested in Ireland's lower house of parliament. According to exit polls, Ireland's 3 largest parties are neck and neck. Sinn Féin leads slightly with 21.1% of the vote, Fine Gael is close behind at 21%, and Fianna Fáil trails at 19.5%. However, Ireland's proportional representation system means transfer votes could still shake up the final outcome. This election was called earlier this month by Prime Minister Simon Harris, Ireland's youngest ever Taoiseach. Harris, known as the TikTok Taoiseach for his social media savvy, leads Fine Gael, but the campaign hasn't been without controversy. A viral video of Harris dismissing a care worker and past scandals involving Sinn Féin have made headlines during this heated race. The major issues on voters' minds: the cost of living crisis, housing shortages, immigration, and preparing Ireland's economy for future trade challenges. Ballot counting began this morning, and final results could take several days. If the exit polls hold, we're likely looking at little change to the current coalition between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, though negotiations with smaller parties and independents may complicate the path to a majority. Breaking news from China. A colossal gold deposit valued at an estimated 600 billion yuan, or about $83 billion, has been discovered in central China's Yunnan province. The Geological Bureau of Yunnan Province reported the discovery of 40 gold veins at a depth of 2 kilometers in Pingjiang County. These veins alone are believed to contain 300 metric tons of gold, part of a larger deposit estimated to hold 1,000 metric tons. Core samples also indicate extraordinary quality, with up to 138 grams of gold per metric ton of ore, according to Science Alert. This discovery comes as global gold prices rise amid economic uncertainty. China already leads the world in gold reserves, holding over 2,000 tons, and accounts for about 10% of global gold production. The ongoing exploration suggests that even more reserves may be waiting to be uncovered. If verified, this could surpass South Africa's South Deep mine as the largest gold deposit ever discovered, cementing China's dominance in the global gold market. With exploration continuing, this discovery could reshape the gold industry. 5 years after a fire devastated Paris's iconic Notre Dame Cathedral, the historic landmark is finally set to reopen. French President Emmanuel Macron recently toured the cathedral, offering the public its first glimpses of the extraordinary restoration work. His visit highlighted the dedication and skill of the expert artists and artisans who have been working tirelessly to preserve Our Lady for generations to come. The fire in April 2019 shocked the world, destroying the cathedral's iconic spire and much of its wooden roof. Since then, meticulous efforts have been underway to restore its grandeur while honoring its centuries-old history. As the reopening approaches, the restoration is being celebrated as a triumph of art, craftsmanship, and human perseverance. Israel struck several Hezbollah sites in Lebanon on Saturday, maintaining tension despite a fragile ceasefire agreement. The strikes targeted what the Israeli military described as Hezbollah facilities used to transport weapons and engage in militant activities, including a site at the Lebanon-Syria border. Hezbollah has not commented on the attacks. Under the ceasefire agreement reached earlier this week, Hezbollah fighters have begun retreating north of the Litani River, and Israeli forces are set to withdraw from southern Lebanon over the next 60 days. While sporadic attacks continue, restrictions on movement and gatherings in Israeli border communities have started to ease, signaling cautious progress toward stability in the region. In contrast, the situation in Gaza remains dire. Israeli airstrikes in northern Gaza have killed dozens, according to local rescue workers, with entire families reportedly buried under debris in the town of Beit Lahia. Israel denies targeting civilians, stating its operations are focused on Hamas fighters and infrastructure. The ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza has left hundreds of thousands without access to essential resources, as aid flows remain severely restricted. The fragile truce in Lebanon stands in stark contrast to the escalating conflict in Gaza, highlighting the region's complex and volatile dynamics. Jihadist fighters from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham (HTS) and allied factions have cut the strategic Damascus-Aleppo highway, leading to some of the fiercest fighting in years in northern Syria. The death toll has climbed to approximately 200, including 102 HTS fighters, 19 allied faction members, and 61 regime forces, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Civilians have also suffered devastating losses. Russian airstrikes on Aleppo's countryside killed 19 civilians on Thursday, while Syrian army shelling claimed another life the day before, the observatory reported. This escalation comes as Russia, a key ally of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, continues its military support for the regime. Russian intervention since 2015 has significantly shifted the momentum of Syria's civil war in Assad's favor, allowing his forces to regain control over large parts of the country. The situation remains volatile, with mounting casualties and the severing of a vital transport route further complicating the already dire humanitarian crisis in the region. Amid growing concerns over Ukraine's ability to sustain its military efforts against Russia, the Biden administration is urging Ukrainian officials to expand their draft and lower the conscription age to 18. Currently, Ukraine drafts men starting at age 25, But U.S. officials believe that increasing the pool of eligible recruits is critical to addressing what they describe as a troop-level problem. A senior U.S. official, speaking anonymously, stated that Ukraine might need at least 160,000 additional soldiers, though the actual number could be higher. This push comes as the White House has provided over $56 billion in military aid to Ukraine since the February 2022 invasion, with more expected before President Biden leaves office. European allies have echoed similar concerns, emphasizing that Ukraine's manpower shortage, not its weaponry, is the primary challenge. The strain is particularly evident in regions like Kursk, where Ukrainian forces are stretched thin amid increasing pressure from Russian and North Korean troops. This effort to bolster Ukraine's military also comes as uncertainty looms over the continuation of U.S. support under President-elect Donald Trump, who has vowed to end the war swiftly but has not clarified how future aid to Kiev would factor into his plans. At least 31 people have lost their lives after torrential rains triggered devastating floods and landslides in Indonesia's North Sumatra province. The disaster has impacted 4 districts, including Medan and rural areas like Sibolangit and Sayur Matinggi, where landslides have buried roads and cut off access to several communities. Rescuers are racing against time to search for survivors under treacherous conditions. Efforts include recovering people trapped in 3 cars and a tourist bus buried under mud and debris on a key route from Medan to Barastajai. Officials report that the death toll from this specific landslide has risen to 9, with more bodies recovered from the site. Temporary shelters are struggling to accommodate thousands of displaced residents, while North Sumatra's Disaster Management Agency has requested a disaster emergency status to expedite aid and mobilize national resources. Authorities warn that heavy rains are expected to continue through early December, keeping the region at elevated risk for further disasters. Malaysia is bracing for its worst floods in a decade as heavier-than-expected monsoon rains have already killed 3 people and displaced over 90,000. The National Disaster Command Center reported that 94,778 people from more than 28,000 families have been evacuated to 527 temporary shelters across 9 states. The northeastern state of Kelantan has been hardest hit, with over 63,000 residents displaced, followed by Terengganu with more than 22,000 evacuations. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim announced that all cabinet ministers are banned from taking leave and have been instructed to provide direct assistance in flood-prone areas. Deputy Prime Minister Ahmed Zahid Hamidi warned that this year's floods could surpass those of 2014, which displaced over 250,000 people and claimed 21 lives. Zahid stated that nearly 83,000 personnel, along with thousands of rescue boats, vehicles, and helicopters, have been mobilized, and over 8,400 evacuation centers nationwide have been prepared to accommodate up to 2 million people. Malaysia's annual monsoon season, which runs from November to March, is expected to bring between 5 and 7 episodes of heavy rainfall, with more states likely to be affected in the coming weeks. 12 children have died from malnutrition in Sudan's capital this month, as the ongoing conflict between the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, and the Sudanese army devastates healthcare and humanitarian services. The deaths occurred in the South Belt area of Khartoum, which includes neighborhoods like Al-Ingaz, Al-Azhari, and Mayo. According to the South Belt Emergency Room, more than 3,500 cases of malnutrition were reported in November, alongside 80 cholera cases and 4 additional deaths. The RSF has controlled the South Belt since fighting erupted in mid-April, worsening the health crisis by disrupting aid deliveries and cutting off medical supplies. Over 80% of health centers in the area are now non-operational, and all charitable kitchens have been forced to close due to financial constraints. Sudan's healthcare system, already fragile, is on the brink of collapse. The World Health Organization estimates that 80% of health facilities in conflict zones are no longer functioning, leaving residents with little access to food, medicine, or medical care. The lack of resources has significantly exacerbated the malnutrition crisis in the region. And that wraps up today's coverage. Thanks for joining us as we unpack the stories that matter. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and in the know, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Until next time, take care and stay